The Witch Doctor's Curse, a true horror story from Africa. I never believed in the supernatural. Ghosts, spirits, and curses were just stories told to scare children, right? That was until I experienced something that shook me to my core, something I struggled to talk about even now. I need to share my story, though, if only to warn others. This all happened about 5 years ago, when I was on a volunteer trip in Africa. I had always wanted to travel to Africa. The idea of helping communities in need while experiencing a completely different culture was thrilling to me. So, when I got the opportunity to join a volunteer program in a small village in Uganda, I jumped at it. The village was remote, nestled in the dense jungle, far from any city. It was beautiful and vibrant, but also had an air of mystery. The villagers were friendly, always welcoming us with smiles and hospitality. There was one thing, however, that stood out as odd: their fear of a nearby forest. They called it Kijani Miti, or the Green Forest. The villagers warned us never to enter Kijani Miti. They spoke of strange occurrences and unexplainable phenomena happening within its depths. I thought it was just superstition, something to keep children from wandering off. How wrong I was. One evening, after a long day of building a school, a fellow volunteer named Jake suggested we explore the forest. He was an adventurer, always seeking thrills. I was hesitant, but curiosity got the better of me. Against the warnings of the villagers, Jake and I decided to venture into Kijani Miti. The moment we stepped into the forest, the atmosphere changed. It was eerily quiet, with only the sounds of our footsteps and the occasional rustling of leaves. The deeper we went, the denser the forest became. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches twisting into strange shapes. After about an hour of walking, we came across a small clearing. In the center stood an ancient, crumbling hut. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Intrigued, we decided to investigate. As we approached the hut, a sense of dread washed over me. The air grew colder, and I felt like we were being watched. I told Jake we should turn back, but he laughed it off and pushed open the creaky door. Inside, the hut was dark and filled with strange artifacts. Animal bones, feathers, and jars of unidentifiable substances lined the shelves. In the center of the room was a large wooden mask. Unlike anything I had ever seen, it had hollow eyes and a wide, menacing grin. Jake, ever the thrill-seeker, picked up the mask and put it on, dancing around and mocking the villagers' superstitions. I tried to laugh along, but something about the mask unnerved me. It felt alive. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed through the forest. The ground shook, and the air became thick with an overwhelming stench of decay. Jake ripped the mask off and looked at me, his face pale with fear. We decided to leave, but as we turned to go, we saw him. Standing in the doorway was an old man, his eyes glowing in the dim light. He was dressed in tattered clothes and held a staff adorned with bones and feathers. His presence was menacing, and I could feel the hatred radiating from him. "Why have you disturbed my sanctuary?" he growled in a deep, guttural voice. "We didn't mean any harm," I stammered. "We were just curious." The old man stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Curiosity can be dangerous," he said. "You have angered the spirits." Before we could react, he began to chant in a language I didn't understand. The room seemed to spin, and a wave of nausea hit me. Jake tried to run, but the old man raised his staff, and Jake froze in place, his eyes wide with terror. "You will pay for your disrespect," the old man hissed. With that, everything went black. I woke up outside the hut, the sun setting in the distance. Jake was beside me, unconscious but breathing. I shook him awake, and we stumbled back to the village, not daring to look back. The villagers knew immediately where we had been. Their faces were grim as they listened to our story. They told us we had encountered a powerful witch doctor, a guardian of the forest, who commanded dark forces. We had to leave the village immediately, they said, before the curse took hold. We packed our things and left that night. On the way back to the city, Jake became increasingly ill. He was feverish, and his body was covered in strange red welts. By the time we reached the hospital, it was too late. Jake passed away, his face twisted in agony. I returned home, haunted by the experience. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something had followed me from the forest. Strange things began to happen. Objects in my house would move on their own, and I would wake up with scratches and bruises I couldn't explain. Desperate, I sought out help from a local shaman. He performed a cleansing ritual and told me I had been marked by the witch doctor. The curse was powerful, but he believed he could help. It took months of rituals and offerings, but eventually, the strange occurrences stopped. Even now, years later, I still have nightmares about the forest and the witch doctor. I can never forget the look in his eyes or the sound of his voice as he cursed us. I don't know if the curse is truly gone or just lying dormant, waiting for the right moment to strike again. So, if you ever find yourself in a remote village in Africa, heed the warnings of the locals. Some places are best left undisturbed, and some spirits should never be angered.